live.
Yep. Okay. Welcome to Genealogy Basics Part 2, Vital Records. I'm Elisa Austin of the Grass Valley Library, and we have over...
I'm Laura Picani, and I'm at the Doris Foley Library.
And in the background is the invisible Zoom operator, Casey Wilson. So thank you, Casey. Today we are covering part 2 of the 5-part series for people who are just beginning their genealogy research. We'll be talking about birth, marriage, death, and coroners records. These are the type of records that you find on Ancestry, Family Search, Find My Past, and Heritage Quest. You can find some of these records in county or state repositories. And please keep your questions and heckling to the end during our Q&A period. So
you could put questions in the chat too as we go along.
Yeah. So our next slide here is birth certificates, and you can find various facts from this document. You can find name changes, parents' names, locations, if there was a twin, and it states vary due to privacy laws as to who can request the document. Most certificates started to be recorded in the late 19th century, and usually after the year you are looking for. And you can retrieve these records from the county clerk or the state repository for a nominal fee of about $10 to $20.
Yeah, as long as you were born, though, if you were hatched, you might not be able to find something.
Yeah.
So we had some questions in the last presentation about adoption records. So we pulled together some information on this, and there's a whole bunch of links in here that Casey's going to post into the chat. You can also email me if you would like, and I'll send all of these links to you. I'm the one who sent out the invitation to the Zoom meeting. So if you want to respond to that email address, that'll work. Or the library reference email address is at the end here. Casey, we're not seeing it as a slideshow anymore. You can see it.
Right, because she's putting the links in the chat.
Ah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Every once in a while when I put the links in, it'll switch over to that other one, but I'll jump right back as fast as I can.
I should have known that Casey was totally on it. But if you click on from current slide, it wouldn't go back to the beginning. So I did know something.
You're right, you got me.
Adoption records vary by state. Most people who are adopted know that there's 2 types of adoptions: open adoptions and closed adoptions. So that distinction makes a difference in whether you'd find your ancestors' records easily or not. The clerk of the court is usually the person or the entity that has these kinds of records. If it was an open adoption, you can request a certificate and other papers. Generally, you can request at age 18. There are sometimes stipulations attached to the release of information, such as after 30 years or something like that. Again, it really varies by state. You'll have to find out the state information. If you need the records, if they were your records and you needed them sooner, then you can, of course, petition the court for like health reasons or something like that. Closed adoptions are always closed, and you would need a court order request for the health history, and you would probably need to get a lawyer to petition the court. And if you're looking for older records of somebody who was adopted, check under orphanages, or children's home was sometimes was a commonly used term for that. If you check census records for the address of the orphanage, Sometimes they will have listed all of the children who are under the orphanage's care and their addresses, their ages, and perhaps some other information. So again, this list of links are databases that Elisa found, or are resources that Elisa found, and some of them have databases where you can submit your name and see if somebody is searching for you. So you can try those out and see if any of those are of help. Okay, we also had requests for information about Native American and African American resources. Again, if you want any of these lists, you can email me and I will send them out to you. Family search is on both of these lists, as is accessgenealogy.com, and Facebook groups, as well as Heritage Quest and, oh, I already said Ancestry. All of these organizations have information about Native American and African American ancestry. There's also the genealogybank.com has Native American obituaries, and Facebook groups for both of those for both of those subjects abound. There's lots of Facebook groups.
Oh, there's thousands.
Yes, thousands, at least 4. For African American history, the Freedmen's Bureau records are also very valuable. There's the freedmensbureau.com and the Freedmen's Bureau of Marriages. So those are some of the possibilities that we came up with that you might want to explore and see if you can find some useful information.
Okay, the next record is baptismal record. They're pretty straightforward. I found this one on Ancestry. It'll show usually just the name, the date of the baptismal, the profession of the parents, the city and village where they lived, and usually of course the pastor. And some of these records are online on such sites as Ancestry and Find My Past. So yeah, they're pretty, as again, straightforward. And next slide.
Then we come to marriages, which I always want to say is marriage. Anyway, marriage records and certificates are valuable sources of information. They often have the parents' names, or the married folks' names, locations and dates. Relatives might be listed or might have been witnesses. Religion or pastor was often an important piece of information to include, and the location of where the couple was married. Marriage bans are also something to know about. Those were like an announcement that people were going to be married, that they had agreed to marry each other. These were popular in Europe and used in early America, like the 17th century, but then the marriage license came along and they fell a bit out of favor in this country. Women at the time didn't have rights, but the marriage bans showed that the woman had agreed to getting married. And then there's also marriage index and registers, which have minimal information, just names and dates. We have those here at the Foley for Nevada County, and you could search by the groom's name or by the bride's name. So that's good for confirming kind of general information that you might be able to find an announcement for in a newspaper or such. And the next slide. Then there's the other side of the coin, the divorce records and annulment records. They will often have a plaintiff, the person who's asking for the divorce, and the defendant. There are petitions for divorce, which shows the kind of the cause and the request for the divorce, and then the decree, which is the final judgment. The example on this page is a divorce petition coupon, I don't know if that means you get a few dollars off the divorce. And you can see it lists the location, the county, the names, where the date of the marriage and where they were married. And often it will have a cause. And in this cause, it's indignities. Sometimes you'll see like just a general divorce record where they'll check a box for either divorce or annulment. Annulments, of course, are usually with Catholic marriages. Elisa has some relatives where the marriage ended, and after that, each of the spouses just basically declared the other spouse as deceased on their records. So if you come across something like that is confusing, that it might be the case that the marriage was dissolved.
Well, my ancestors just couldn't stand each other, and because they were Catholic, they just it was just easier just to declare each other dead. You know, it was so much easier than going through
your destiny is basically what
annulment or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know,
pretty comical.
Some states would not allow divorces. I think in New York, it wasn't until mid 20th century that you were allowed to get a divorce, or they would allow them under only certain extreme circumstances, such as adultery or abuse. So divorce records are sometimes mixed in with marriage records, and or they're just kind of in the same general area. Annulment records, on the other hand, are usually not kept with the state vital records office. Elisa, would they be at the church parish or something like that? Yeah.
And we found this divorce petition on Ancestry. So you can find later divorce records usually on Ancestry. I've tried finding records that were earlier, and they're kind of few. There's few on there. So anyway, so now we get to death. So I found this document on Ancestry. This is my great grandmother. Her name was Vienna Catherine Heenan. And if you look at the information, you can find on the death certificate, location, date of death, age, birth date, occupation, the name of her parents, cause of death, and the informer. And sometimes the informer was a relative. Most of the time it was a relative. So yeah, and then let's see, there might be restrictions to access of these documents. Sometimes you have to, prove who you are in relation to the person who died. So, so you might have to send in your driver's license or something like that. Another source you can look for is the online searchable death indexes for the USA. Casey, if you could put that link in there, that would be great. Let's see.
She already did.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep. Way ahead of us as usual.
Yes. So, and the next document here is coroner's reports. Woohoo! Doris Foley Library has local coroner's reports and mortuary records. This is a public record, and it has vital information on it. And this here is an example I found online of a graphic description, drawings of where their mortal injuries were. So they can go into the cause of death in great detail. They'll usually say the name, the race, their age, the color of their eyes and their hair color. Maybe they'll have a mustache, a scar. It also mentioned like their weight, height, and occupation. I found my great grandmother's 1863 coroner's report through the Mitchell Library in Glasgow, Scotland. And it was a 25 megabyte file, so they sent me a flash drive of it. So So there's all sorts of fun things you can find out. And now it is time for questions and answers. Is there something you want us to discuss in the next presentation, which will be more records? So that will be covering all sorts of things such as naturalization records, cemeteries. Yes, so let's see what we have here in the chat.
Let me just point out Susan Rogers, who's one of our volunteers at the Foley. Yay, Susan.
Yay.
And a genealogy guru. She mentioned that Pennsylvania death certificates like Elisa's showing are pretty cool. And also mentioned ancestry.com has them online. So yes, sometimes you can find the death records and death certificates, I'm sorry, on ancestry.com as like attachments or things you can pull up. Other times they'll just give you a citation or just the facts from it. Were there other questions in the chat that I missed? I don't think so.
Anybody have any questions? Let's see.
Ancestry doesn't have PA archive. Is there another place to find?
Pennsylvania Archive.
Doesn't have Pennsylvania Archive?
What do you mean? Can we unmute him?
Laura, can I jump in here? This
Sure.
is Susan.
Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just wonder if Richard is mixing up PA Archive with the Pennsylvania Death Certificate Collection. Those are two separate things. Ancestry.com has images of Pennsylvania death certificates, just like the one Elisa showed us. And in most cases, you can see an exact image of the actual death certificate like we were shown there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. My question was not related to that chat. I had that question before I came on. All my relatives lived in Pennsylvania. And so I'm not getting very far with ancestry.com because they don't have the Pennsylvania archive. So I can't find birth and date and marriage records and stuff.
Well, Richard, the archives don't always have all of that. What is it that makes you think that the Pennsylvania archives have all that information?
Oh,
I
don't know. I guess I was just making an assumption. I found a ton of information about property taxes and, where ancestors lived at different dates and joining the militia and the Revolutionary War. I'm trying to track people from the 16 and 1700s.
There's not a lot in the 1600s in Pennsylvania. Most people started arriving around early 1700s.
Right.
Virtually all of my relatives started out there, and I used to think that's the only place they were, and then they finally got into some other states.
States,
Richard,
the county records might have something.
Yeah, and I can connect.
Right.
You know what I'll do is I will send my email and my phone number to Laura. And Laura, if you can forward those on to Richard rather than my just putting them in the chat here. I'd be happy to connect with Richard personally and see if I can help him, since I have a lot of Pennsylvania experience.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Susan.
So in general, are you saying the Pennsylvania archive doesn't have birth, marriage, and date records?
Not per se. If I'm understanding, when you refer to Pennsylvania archives, there are some thick books that are referred to as the Pennsylvania archives, and they're different volumes, and they are basically collections of information that came from other places. Like for example, I found in the Pennsylvania archives, one of the volumes, the records of a cemetery where a lot of my ancestors were buried in Montgomery County, right south of Philadelphia. And I was really happy to find that, because they had the names and death dates off of the tombstones. Some woman walked the church cemetery in the 1930s and transcribed all these tombstones. And some of those are unreadable today. So I was like, yay, here it is. But a lot of the others, like you mentioned, they're They're collections of military records and who served in what regiment and all over the state and this sort of thing. So they're not necessarily, no, they're not just things like, here's a list of people who were born here at this time. They're just varied all over in terms of subject and whatever. And I can't remember. Well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up on my genealogy software here while Elisa moves ahead with her presentation. And then if I find something, I'll stick it in the chat and maybe we can resume this conversation after the presentation is over.
Richard, go ahead, Laura.
If you have a follow-up, go ahead. I was just going to read another question that was here.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask Richard, what county are you researching?
Oh, well, it's Chester and Montgomery, so we're in the same
okay.
area.
Okay.
And just to clarify, you asked, you were wondering what I meant by Pennsylvania Archive. I was looking at microfiche in the West Virginia State Library, and they had, and it was all called, that's the only name I know for it. It was called Pennsylvania Archive, and I would,
Right.
they had an index, and then I'd look up stuff,
Right.
and you know.
Yeah, they're referring to some very thick books, and there are numerous volumes of them, and as a group, they're called the Pennsylvania Archives.
Yeah. This was all on microfiche, so it was. Okay.
You might check, like, sometimes the counties would have like a county history, you know, for a certain year, like, you know, Montgomery County history 1850, and then it'll talk about the whole history of the county from when everybody arrived. So you can find all sorts of information from those books. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd be happy to connect with Richard, and Laura, you have my permission to send Richard my phone number and my email.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Susan.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
Let's-
Leah asked, were some of Nevada County records destroyed, and when and how much? Now, I will say the earlier records are spotty just because of the nature of the gold rush and forming towns and government bodies and things like that. I know that for like mortuary records, we are missing the 1930s because there was a fire at Hooper and Weaver, and some of those records were destroyed. Elisa, are you aware of any other gaps in the records?
Well, in the early years, you know, there were a lot of fires that took out a lot of the town, and so we lost probably lots of early records there. Even just things like city directories from the old times. So yeah, the early records are pretty spotty.
Right.
So sometimes you have to go sideways on some of the records, like looking at voter registration records and things like that. So I'll be covering those in future programs.
Leah, did that answer your question, or was there something specific? Looking at 1860, what type of records? Birth, death, that whole
Census. You could also look at the California 1855 census. That might show some of the gap too. Anything in particular you're looking for, like that you're needing, or just anything? Any that
when
shows.
my family came. Okay.
Yeah.
Leah, if you want to email me about your specific situation, then I can take a look and see what we might have here that could help you out in figuring out those early years.
Yeah, we could maybe put together the puzzle. So like you could, do you know where they came from before California?
Also, Leah, there should be a pop-up asking if you want to unmute. If you have a microphone, you can
Okay.
explain a little more.
Oh, yeah. You can do that.
Oh, Cornwall. So we might have something in the naturalization records.
Yeah.
So that's something. So you should. Oh, okay.
On the mic. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
you're
the
doing just fine. You're doing fine with the typing thing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have a Cornwall collection too at Foley. So their names might be in some of those Cornish books.
Yeah.
So you might try.
So this goes for anybody. If you're working on like local genealogy, local history, and you have specific questions, somebody you're trying to track down, feel free to email me about that. Either my laura.papani address or the library reference email address, which will show up in the next slide. Oh, which Casey has
Woohoo!
presciently has very nicely posted. Either one of those addresses comes to me, and I'm happy to do some research and let you know if there's anything that I can find. And then the Foley is also open to the public Thursdays and Fridays from 1 to 3 p.m. Not a.m., but you knew that. And then I'm open on most Saturdays by appointment. So if you just say, hey, I want to come at 10 o'clock or something, just let me know, and I can open up for you. Go ahead, Elisa.
Oh, no, I was just going to add for Richard, you might want to check on Facebook to see if there are any Facebook groups for Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Sometimes there are specific groups on Facebook that you can find. Even even villages in Cornwall, you might be able to find people over there that are researching Cornwall on Facebook. So
for Leah or okay.
Yeah. So
Casey, are there any questions over on Facebook? Can people post there?
We can't see from our end.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any questions on Facebook.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or any comments or any topics that you want us to try to cover in our future presentations? It's up on the slide, by the way. The next part 3, which is other records, is going to be Thursday, July 1st at 11 a.m. We had to do a little bit of shifting around of the time. These presentations are recorded, so if you're not able to make that time, then you will be able to get to the recorded version on our YouTube channel after the fact.
Yeah, we'll be talking about various topics on that program. It's going to be longer than this one. I'll be covering census, land, naturalization, war, cemeteries. So stay tuned for that. So are there any more questions?
Or Susan, did you have any other suggestions you wanted to pop in with? You're so
not right now. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're going to be wrapping it up then. So